and congratulations, Helena, for this wonderful book and project. And thank you for inviting us to be part of it. And good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming today to celebrate with us today. So my story is really interesting. So in 2018, we started a project that we called Project Orbit. So Helena was the main driver of that project, and she conceptualized this research project about conducting research in Africa, so looking at business and management in the broader African context and trying to understand how multinational companies are running their businesses when they are outside of South Africa, and also looking at European multinationals in terms of how they do their business in other African countries. And also we were interested in understanding how the local firms that we called local champions in their context were executing their business activities. So we embarked on this big project where we tried to understand the practices that managers would employ to manage their staff. So it was in Botswana when we were conducting an interview with one of the retail owners. So he was a CEO in his company. And then he just said, you know how I discipline my people? I take them to the Kgotla. And we're like, what? What is a Kgotla? So this person doesn't speak Sesotho or Setswana that is spoken in Botswana, right? So, and he said, I take my staff to the Kgotla to be disciplined. So I had to ask the question again just to make sure that I understood. I said, do you mean the Kgotla, like the gathering? He said, yes, I'm referring to that. So that is where the story of our book chapter on how to theorize Kgotla began. And after that interview, it was quite interesting to learn about what Kgotla was. So Kgotla simply means a place of gathering, right? So it can be a physical structure where people are actually seated. And if you think about it, it's almost like the way we are seated tonight. So you will have people who are sitting in a semicircle, and you will have the leaders in front. So it is a practice that chiefs in Botswana would use to engage their people. So in other words, they will call people to come to the Kgotla to have meetings. So I said that the Kgotla is a physical infrastructure. And the second part about the Kgotla is that it's a method of engagement where you are engaging with the community, where every person has a right of invitation to attend the Kgotla meeting. And when they are in the meeting, so every person has a right to speak, and they have a right to deliberate on any issue. So it doesn't matter whether you are educated or not, but you're given right of participation. And what was very interesting about the Kgotla is the fact that it is based on consensus. So everything that is decided upon in the Kgotla meeting, it has to be based on the consensus or the agreement from everyone in the meeting. So that was like really, really an interesting phenomenon to learn about. And part of it is also the fact that you can take people to be disciplined at the Kgotla, so which was the method that was used by this retail owner to manage their staff. Then in the subsequent interviews, so I thought, okay, in retail it makes sense that you can absolutely take your employees to the Kgotla to be disciplined. But then in the subsequent interview, we were talking to a South African multinational that is in the banking industry. And they were talking about how they are managing their employees. And guess what? They mentioned Kgotla again. I'm like, this is really interesting. The fact that someone running just a retail business now to a formal business, and in that case, a foreign business, has actually adopted a local method of engaging people to actually lead their employees. And after coming back from the field work, I discussed with Helena, and she's like, maybe we should do something about Kgotla. So Then I went back to Botswana now to specifically focus on Kgotla to try and understand what it is. I know in South Africa we have this word that we use loosely to say there is Kgotla, just referring to a meeting, but in fact it is a mechanism, it is a phenomenon in Botswana that they really treasure the most. So the second time when I went, so now this was more of an ethnographic study, going there just to learn about Kgotla and attend Kgotla meetings to see how they actually conduct Kgotla. And from that engagement where I interviewed local chiefs and I interviewed the community members to understand how did they actually engage in Kgotla and what are their views. And that is one of the strong governance mechanisms that is contributing to Botswana's stability. So after that, Helena, then that's where we started to think about theorizing it, because we're saying we haven't seen papers that have theorized Kgotla. We know that in management there is participatory decision-making processes, but do this actually mirror Kgotla, or Kgotla is different? And we embarked on a journey to theorize Kgotla, which we are still on it. Remember, it started in 2018-19, and that journey is still in the nascent phase. So that is the story of our chapter. So it's really about how do you take an indigenous phenomenon and theorize it. So we always complain about the lack of theories, that represent Africa. And also, when we have this, theories that are developed in the Western world, we argue that they are not applicable in our context. And our context has so much to offer, but the challenging thing is how do we tell the stories of this phenomena that we are seeing in an everyday life? So you think when you're talking about it, it's much more easier. I'm going to develop a theory on Kgotla. But oh no, it is absolutely challenging to navigate. Our book chapter provides us with a guidance on how do you actually theorize an indigenous phenomenon that you are seeing in your world. So an indigenous phenomenon is something that is distinct from a cultural perspective in terms of how people engage and the behaviors that are involved in the phenomenon. So what I've actually learned from the process is that theorizing is not easy. It is really hard and it takes time and you need to be patient. So with the book chapter, actually I see that as a victory, because we've been battling not knowing how do we actually position that. And the breakthrough is in the fact that we had to learn how to theorize first an indigenous phenomenon and write theory about how to theorize it. And then the second part will be testing the theory that we've developed on how to theorize an indigenous phenomenon to see whether it will actually work and whether it will help us to push the boundaries of knowledge and write about our context. So it is incredibly hard to say to the field, but this is new. But then you realize that it's not completely new because other people will have related mechanisms. So how do you actually articulate that this is worth it? So in the book chapter, we developed a 2x2 matrix that demonstrates how people need to theorize indigenous phenomenon. So we came up also, part of that matrix is coming up with new terminologies of developing theories, where we talk about theory being incremental, where we talk about theory being disruptive, where we talk about breakthrough theorizing and also disruptive theorizing. So part 2, Helena, will be to see whether the 2x2 matrix will work in collecting the data about Kgotla.